Self-respect creates the foundation for how the world shows up for you. And it also heavily impacts your ability to succeed, your relationships, and your experience of this life. So if you're noticing that people walk all over you, or you feel resentful or disappointed in relationships, and that's any kind of relationship, right? So romantic relationships, friendships, family, work relationships, then something that just might be lacking a bit is self-respect. Hi there, I'm Jennilee. I'm a mindset coach that loves to support folks in ending self-abandonment, ending playing small, self-doubt, and just in general, not showing up to what you really want to be creating in your life so that you can have that life, that love, and that impact that you truly desire. So let's look at the components of self-respect and how, when you pay attention to these things, helps you to really establish a greater sense of self-respect and showing up more powerfully and with greater presence in your life. One of the aspects that really impacts self-respect are your values. So identifying what matters to you so you can know how to show up for yourself and how to communicate with others to show up for you as well is very important and key to both getting clarity on just your general direction, but also on your boundaries and your personal commitments to yourself, and then how you want to walk that out in life. An example of some values might be like clarity, communication, honesty, integrity, compassion, openness. And I will have a free downloadable sheet where you can just look over a list of values if you want a refresher or you want to get more clear about your values, because that's going to impact everything else too in regard to what's going to help you build that self-respect and how that will impact everything else. So the next one is personal commitments. These are commitments that you make with yourself, like saying, okay, I'm committed to prioritizing my health and fitness, and so that means X, right? So whatever that means for you, then that would be your personal commitment. Or it can be something like, I commit to always take some time to consult with myself, my values, before I make a major decision. And so that can really help you in those moments where maybe somebody they want you to get back to them, they're trying to push you forward, and you're like, hey, I actually need some time to think about this, because to me, this is important, and you don't even have to justify it. Just saying that, hey, I need some time to think about that. That's easier to do when you know you've made that commitment to yourself. I value having space, feeling centered when I'm making decisions, making sure I'm thinking from my values and not just from maybe like FOMO, a fear of missing out, or guilt or something. But is it grounded in my values and what I care about? Cool, or even things like, I commit to remove myself from people and situations that are not respecting me, that are manipulating me in any way, or if I'm feeling unsafe, right? Now, if you are someone that has had a pattern or habit of abandoning yourself in conversations, in relationships, in places where maybe you feel like someone has authority over you, then this particular commitment around, I'm going to remove myself, or I'm going to honor myself in some way if I'm feeling uncomfortable or unsafe, I'm paying attention to that, right? So commitment around taking some really important action in those moments can help with the self-awareness you're going to need to develop. If you're used to abandoning yourself, you probably have been also used to ignoring the awareness about like, hey, this doesn't feel good. And like tracking that, slowing down, and then taking action to address that versus trying to ignore it and push it away, right? So a personal commitment to yourself is not, and these things are also not things you have to get perfectly, right? These are things that you're committing to so that you show up to them more and more each day, so that you build that muscle, so that you can tell when the commitment isn't being fulfilled by yourself, so that you can reorient yourself to that commitment, right? So the commitment is not to be like this perfectionistic stick to just add more reasons to criticize yourself. They're really just like, hey, this is what I'm creating is my commitment. This is going to be my intention going forward. And so that I'm going to be having this more conscious in my mind as I move throughout the world. That's going to help guide me as I show up to things and people and situations and opportunities. So your values will help to inform these personal commitments you have to yourself, and these personal commitments will help to inform your boundaries. They're all connected. And you could also work that backwards. If you actually know some of your boundaries, that can help you discover your values. So, but yeah, the next part would be then boundaries. These are really important to, understanding what your boundaries are really important to self-respect, and also knowing that discovering your boundaries or understanding what they are, is like a evolutionary process. It's a process that grows and changes over time. So sometimes we discover we have a boundary when it's crossed. And so that's why developing that awareness around, like, what am I feeling? I'm jumping ahead a little bit because the next part is self-awareness. What am I feeling? Is this anger? If it's anger, does that mean like I have a boundary that's been crossed? Or like, why do I feel angry? You may need a process of discovering what your boundaries are, but you probably do already know what some of them are. And you can look to things like, when do I feel resentful? When do I feel angry? When's the last time something just did not work for me? So for example, if you value honesty and you've made a commitment to yourself that if somebody or something makes you feel disrespected or manipulated or unsafe, then you're going to remove yourself from that. Then if you notice someone is maybe trying to like push you too fast in a relationship, or trying to get you to change your mind about something important, or you feel like there's being like guilt, or someone's trying to use more subtle forms of manipulation, like guilting you, trying to shame you into something or out of something, then the boundary would be like, hey, I'm no longer going to engage with this relationship. I'm not going to pursue it. I'm not going to engage with it. I can bring this up to the person if I feel safe enough to do so, and say like, hey, this doesn't work for me. If I see this happening again, then I'm ending whatever we're talking about, and that's going to be that. But the boundary is what you're going to do for you. Boundaries aren't about controlling somebody else. They're like, hey, if I see this thing happening, I'm going to do this for me. And so that really is like a big part of self-respect, being able to show up for yourself in relationships and in situations so that you can really value you. So not only are you valuing things like honesty and communication and whatnot, but you're valuing you. Like, hey, this matters that I don't feel comfortable. This matters that I don't feel safe. This matters that I really value honesty, and that's not what's happening here, right? So what you're really creating this beautiful relationship with yourself, where you really show yourself that you matter. And that's really important, especially if we are given to self-abandonment. We could have an underlying belief that, well, I guess my feelings don't really matter, or I shouldn't take up too much space, or whatever, right? And so these elements and these components of self-respect really help you to establish that sense of value, which then it's like a system that feeds itself, all right? I value myself more. I have greater self-awareness. I have greater understanding of my values. I have greater personal commitments and greater boundaries. Not greater like they're just huge and no one can ever interact with me, but greater like they're more self-honoring, because like sometimes when we're on that journey, we begin to test out like what is my idea of boundaries? Cool. Like, let me try some boundaries that maybe over time you really realize, oh, well, actually I deserve a lot more than what I used to decide my boundaries were. So, and of course it gets to be like an expanding process. So the last part is that self-awareness, and it really supports everything, right? So my ability to create an open and honest relationship with myself from a place of compassion and care, right? So not a place of like criticizing myself, but an open and honest relationship with myself where I am getting better and better at tracking how I feel, which would be like my emotions, but also my physical sensations can be really wise in telling me when I don't feel comfortable. Like, am I getting really tense around this person or in this situation? What is that showing me? So tracking my thoughts. To whom and in what way do I find myself sort of just in my own thought space, what's the term? Just like handing over decisions to somebody else, or just taking on somebody's thoughts or opinions as my own, or trusting someone too quickly. Like just taking things at face value when I do need to actually know somebody over time to see like, yes, I hear you and I want to be able to trust that, like I'm not going to try to be like overly suspicious of everything, but I do need to have some critical ability to like hold off, right? Like, hey, you seem like a cool person and that's awesome. And I want that to be true. And I'm going to see if it's true, which takes time. It takes time and developing that relationship. And also a strong awareness in myself of, am I feeling uncomfortable? Am I feeling safe? Am I feeling relaxed? Am I feeling tense? What are my thoughts and emotions? What are my physical sensations? And what do I want to do with it? And this self-awareness will also support you in speaking up for yourself when the time comes. And I even had I've had a huge transformation in myself with this. You know, I used to go from years ago where I just had a lot of anxiety all the time, especially around people. And I remember even going to a coffee shop this one time, and I am sensitive to dairy, so I don't consume it. It will cause me physical pain. And so I remember going to this one tea shop this one time where I had said non-dairy milk, right? And they gave me my tea, and I took a sip, and I could sense this is dairy because it has that mucusy taste. You only notice it when you don't drink dairy for a long time. I could tell, and I was like, oh, God. But for me at that time, I kind of went into a freeze moment where I was like, you know, going up and saying something's wrong feels like a conflict to me, and I used to really avoid conflict. And so I was stuck between that, and also I wasn't going to drink it because that would cause me pain. I was sitting there like, I'm just going to have to ignore this or something, you know. So coming from that, right, where it was hard for me to even go back and let someone know that there was a mistake and that's not a big problem, but can you fix it? 2, these days, I notice myself just having this really smooth, automatic movement from noticing something doesn't work for me and then going and letting the person know who needs to address it, or advocating for myself and communicating hey, this doesn't work for me. And I know I can always grow more, but this, to me, I've seen a huge shift. An example from more recently is I went to this hostel where I had been there before, and I knew this room that I really liked. And so I got that room, or at least I thought so. And I get there and they give me a different room, but apparently it had the same amount of dorm beds and stuff. And so they were like, oh, well, it's the same. Well, I go to the other room that I wasn't expecting to be in. And it is not the same to me. I can tell it's in the basement. It smells different. It feels like the beds don't feel as, I don't know, sturdy or something. I remember just walking in and going so I go back up to the front desk, just automatically, I just go back up. I go, hey, I was kind of expecting a different room because I've been here before, and that's what I got when I had reserved this type of room. And, is that available? She was like, oh, it's not available. I was like, is it available tomorrow? You know, I'm not even being angry at them or anything. In my body, I'm just kind of oh, I don't want to be down there. But I could tell I was honoring the fact that I knew that didn't work for me for whatever reason, you know, and that I wanted to explore what else is possible. And then she was like, oh, well, if you want the first floor instead of the basement, then actually we have this other room. I was like, yes, let's do it. So I got into the other room. It felt more like what I was expecting, which to me is important. You know, I have some sensory sensitivity and things, and I really commit to honoring that these days, now that I have that greater awareness about myself. And I knew that I just wasn't going to be able to sleep well or just feel comfortable in the other room for whatever reason. I think also because of where it was, the window, which we were going to have to keep open because it was freaking heat wave in London, was near kind of where people smoked, and I was just like, there's just no way I'm gonna deal with this. Not when the photo for how you reserved the room showed the one I previously got. I was like, come on. So it was really nice that they had, you know, that I got the other space and got in there, and then I felt, you know, relieved and relaxed. And because I showed up for myself and I advocated for myself, which took that self-awareness, that valuing, knowing what I value, and then also that I am valuable, right? So things I value, integrity, even in that case, you could see that as oh, to me, there might have been a mismatch of integrity of this was what was shown. This is this other room that's not of the same quality, in my opinion. So there's a mismatch, right? So that would be me noticing something outside that I value, but also inside, I'm going to show up with integrity to myself, that I will honor my personal commitment to being aware of and gentle with my sensory sensitivity, you know, and how that moved me towards advocacy, self-advocacy. So yeah, I mean, those are kind of simple examples, right? Some tea and then changing a room. But these simple examples are indicators of how that's showing up in small and big ways. If we have hard time advocating for ourselves and respecting ourselves with a T, you could imagine how I was experiencing relationships and getting all walked over and not showing up for my own things I wanted to create in the world, and just kind of like letting life pass me by until I really developed these things. I was not living the life I wanted, and I was not having the relationships I wanted, and it impacted everything. And now I'm really experiencing a much different life and experience because of respecting myself. And then other things that we'll talk about on this channel. But it's so, so, so important because you matter, your experience matters, and so respecting yourself really matters. So, if you want that values sheet, like assessment, you can download that on the website. You can also get my Living Yesfully workbook, which just kind of goes more into what do you want? What is your yes? What is your no? How can you show up for that? Can you give yourself little challenges where, like, yes, this is a muscle you kind of have to build, like, especially if fear gets in the way of this, then it's going to be a muscle in a way that you build to showing up for yourself, speaking up for yourself. And it's okay if it takes some time, but I will say too, you start really enjoying like showing up for yourself. Not that I like conflict now, but I don't run away from it like I used to, because there's the relief that I used to have from, like avoiding conflict, because there's like a momentary relief, but you still have so much discomfort within yourself, right? Because you didn't address the thing that is creating that, is no match for the actual relief of showing up and advocating for yourself, respecting yourself better and more. Like that level of relief, because now I feel safe and I trust myself, is uncomparable. So I hope this is helpful. Let me know what's been your experience with self-respect. What out of this video do you want to start practicing and playing with more? And yeah, if you want to connect, if you want personal support, that's also available. And I will see you here again soon.